Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome to another Mortal Kombat video. Now today I wanted to talk about a female character in this series that I personally feel is very underrated. She's understandably looked over by the main cast of females, as she's not one of the main character love interests, nor is she a sex symbol within the series, so the limelight has never truly been on her. But with Mortal Kombat 11 seemingly around the corner, I thought I'd talk about how underrated she is, the things she's actually done behind the scenes in the original Mortal Kombat games, and what is her potential future in the new Mortal Kombat games. Because although in the new timeline she still is a somewhat side character, there's been a lot of build up and anticipation for what we can see from her, seeing as she was absent for Mortal Kombat X, not including the MKX mobile game with the weird fanfiction-y characters that are in there. It's kind of weird. So let's talk about why Jade has actually been kind of important to the series, and why she's not as popular as characters like Molina, Sonya Blade, and even Kitana. Now first off, let's talk about Jade and her origins a little bit, as it does give you all an idea of how they've kind of been sidelining the character ever since she was brought in. Anyway, let's talk about her origins. Jade is of Edenian descent, but she was robbed of the opportunity of growing up in her world due to the invasion of Shao Kahn, who would purge and kill many Edenians in the process, leaving only a few alive. This happened to include Sindel, Jade, and Kitana, along with a few others, but I'm gonna leave them to their own videos. Now when Sindel died, Jade and Kitana were brought up in Shao Kahn's eyes, acting as his bodyguards up until they learned the fate of Edenia, for which the two would understandably turn against him. Of course this does differ in both timelines, but that is the general idea of the two. So ever since the very beginning, Jade has been kind of intertwined with Kitana's backstory, as the two actually share more of a sisterly bond than Kitana actually shares with Molina, despite them supposedly being sisters and retaining a large amount of each other's genetic makeup. So the relationship between Kitana and Jade is very deep, and this is reflected in both timelines, more so in the new one than the old one, just due to the different styles of storytelling. Now Jade does go to some crazy extents to actually keep Kitana safe, siding with Kitana not only because of what they learned about Edenia, but because together they could surpass any obstacle that was in front of them, as they did play a hand in Shao Kahn's downfall. Now from this point onwards, Jade is actually kind of absent, but does resurface during the events of Mortal Kombat Deception, and here's where Jade actually gets some proper face time. You see, during the events of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, many Earthrealmers teamed up in order to take down Shang Tsung and Quan Chi, but of course if you are familiar with the original timeline, they do fail and all of them are killed. This happened to include Kitana, so Jade is in fact heartbroken over this, but she herself isn't able to grieve properly for that long over her friend's death, because the Dragon King Onaga rises and resurrects all of the Earthrealmers that were killed off by the Deadly Alliance. So Jade was forced to take matters into her own hands and save Kitana's mother Sindel, as she alongside Edenia was captured by the Dragon King, which in turn led to Jade fighting Kitana in one-on-one combat. Upon her victory, she would escape alongside Sindel, so they could come together and formulate a plan that would allow them to save the Earthrealmers that were under Onaga's control. But luckily during this time, Nightwolf, Ermac and Liu Kang were successful in freeing the Earthrealmers from Onaga's control. Now that for the most part does cover a lot of stuff that Jade did in the original timeline, which she really did take a backseat for quite a while, as she only did appear in 4 installments in the original timeline. Now the reason as to why Jade was so undermined in the original timeline was just due to how they kind of structured the story, as well as the characters that actually featured in it. Allow me to elaborate a little bit more. In the original timeline, we didn't have the full-blown cinematic stories. The furthest we ever really got with that was during the events of Deception, as that's where they introduced the Conquest mode, which did allow a ton of character depth for people that were otherwise untouched. But before this, in the first few installments, we could only get a rough gist of what the characters were from just a bit of dialogue and text. So Jade herself didn't really have a full-blown backstory, at least not up until later installments, which is given more layers as a character, but is still undermined. Now the reason for this should be kind of obvious, as I did touch on this a little bit earlier, but she isn't the main love interest of kind of like the main character and hero of the series, which was Liu Kang, who did have his heart set on Kitana. So because of this, she did get kind of sidelined. And of course there's Molina. Now I'm not going to act like I'm completely oblivious to this, as I did mention it again along with Kitana. Molina became a sex symbol of the series. Her seductive and savage nature allows her to function much like a Venus flytrap. She lures you in with pleasant thoughts and ideas before she starts ripping you limb from limb, and I feel like that's where Jade kind of went a little bit weird. She didn't have a gimmick. She kind of awkwardly became the third wheel in that whole friendship. You know the one I'm talking about, when you're just hanging out with your friend and he happens to bring along a girlfriend, and then you're just there stuck stuck alone just wondering, what am I doing with my life? Should I make some Mortal Kombat videos? Oh. Anyway, with jokes aside, let's talk about what they've done to her in the reboot and the changes that we can see. Now, much like the original, she does support Kitana as much as she can. That is at least up until she goes against Shao Kahn's orders, which is something that she is reluctant to comply with. Of course, we definitely do see this change later on in the same chapter, because around this time Kitana learns about her heritage, about how Edenia was burnt to the ground, and really how she's just been a puppet for Shao Kahn up to this point. So Jade is given her own chapter where she tries to save Kitana, who's scheduled to have an execution. And of course, although she's not entirely successful, she does reach out to Raiden for assistance, as really she doesn't want her somewhat sister to die. Now, one thing I really do like about Jade in this new timeline is how they've established a very tight-knit bond between Jade and Kitana, which, like I said, is something we didn't see too much in the original timeline. It was more said than seen. And in here we see the sorrow they shed for one another, as well as the somewhat sisterly love they do share. Now, of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as during the end of MK9, Jade is killed off along with many other Earthrealmers. But what's very interesting here is that she does disappear. What I mean by this is that during the entirety of MKX, she's not heard of or mentioned in the main story by anyone. So she does randomly disappear. And what could this actually lead to being? Well, no doubt in my mind that you guys have heard of this before, but back in MK9's arcade ladder ending, which do have a tendency to actually come to fruition, we see Jade come into contact with a very mysterious individual, as after her battle with Shao Kahn, she seemingly kind of dies. Now, upon meeting this mysterious figure, Jade is revived from the dead, having seemingly survived, but it doesn't seem like she's quite all there. And she does resurface in MKX, but again, it's in another arcade ladder ending, that being Kitana, where after she's had visions of surviving Armageddon in the previous timeline, she grieves over her current revenant form, and how she's somewhat hating what she's become. Now, from this in the background, we see Jade seemingly reaching out to her friend, so it's very safe to believe that there are plans for her to definitely return. And really, in MK11, it feels like the stage has definitely been set for her. Because really, let's think about it. The new timeline is clearly paying a lot of homage to the original, with many events mirroring what we know. But of course, there's that new refreshing twist that's on them. Now, if we're taking into account the old timeline, like I just so happened to mention, when Kitana was in a undead revenant-like form, Jade took it upon herself to try and find a way of curing her. Of course, in the original timeline, she wasn't quite successful, as other people got to her first, but in a new timeline, it seems very different. They've clearly been building this anticipation up for Jade, as the Revenant plot thread has been going on since Mortal Kombat 9, and I believe that it's ultimately going to reach its climax during Mortal Kombat 11. Obviously, you can probably tell where I'm going with this, but I believe that by Jade not being in MKX, it means she was cured of her Revenant form by that said weird mysterious figure. And from the endings we do have in MKX, where some of the Revenants regret their current form, I believe that's going to be Jade that's the one that's able to cure them of their Revenant form, because I don't feel like they'd leave her out for no reason at all. There's clearly something much bigger going on here, and really we also don't know who's the person that brought her back to life. There's very little information to go on here, so we may have a similar scenario with Damashi from Mortal Kombat Deception, where it's a figure entirely created from Onaga, which would make sense and kind of work, as we are in the somewhat deadly alliance phase. I'm saying that with air quotes, by the way, and Deception would be happening right after this, so it would help kind of pave way to the next installment, but that's a prediction in itself. But the most important thing here is that it looks like Jade will finally have the opportunity to get pushed to the forefront of the cast, which is something she's always kind of lacked since she was a side character. Plus, with this new timeline and new take on characters, it's allowed us to kind of explore and flesh out some people that had untapped potential. So yes, I do believe that Jade will be returning in the next installment, and I'm very much so looking forward to seeing what they do with her storyline wise. But yeah, that's kind of it for this video, guys. I do hope you enjoyed it and learned a little bit more from watching. Now, how do you guys feel about Jade? Do you also feel she's underrated? And what other characters do you feel kind of deserve more exposure? Because since we are in a new timeline and the story mode is clearly something that's much more cinematic, it gives us all the opportunity to kind of reinvent characters. You could just look at the older members of the cast as an example. But yeah, that more or less does wrap up the Jade video. Before I do finish up here, I do want to say again, thank you for all of the Mortal Kombat support recently. It's been absolutely phenomenal. phenomenal. I honestly do love this community and it's so good to be back. So you can definitely expect more Mortal Kombat content from me in the future. And then also saying that, I do have one planned for tomorrow where I'm going to be discussing the recent MK11 rumors that's been floating about and kind of giving my own take on how I feel about it, as this somewhat leak is a very interesting topic and it has some very surprising stuff on there. Plus we'll know by the end of this week whether or not it's valid. But yeah, that's kind of it for this video, guys. Now before this video wraps up, guys, if possible, let's try getting it to about 500 likes. It's a great way of supporting this channel since YouTube's ad system is broken as hell. So by giving it a thumbs up, it helps out a ton. And if you want to go that extra step, we also have a Patreon set up and a link for it will be down in the description below. Anyway guys, as always, please comment, like, subscribe and share this video with everyone you know. Please take care and I'll see you all next time.